All right, let's get canceled. Welcome to the Social Condom. Today we are going to be talking about possibly the most controversial topic in the United States history, and that is the N-word. Obviously, that word holds a lot of power, and there's a reason it holds such power. So obviously the word is a different pronunciation of the word nigger, which is derived from the word negro, which is Latin for black, and that it was used by European Americans to infer, in a derogatory fashion, to infer that black people or people of black descent were of an inferior race. And obviously, the reason the word is so powerful is because the black American community was able to do the impossible, which is turn something negative into something positive. And the way they did so was being able to use that word amongst themselves in a non-derogatory fashion. And they were able to monopolize the word so that anyone else who is not a part of that community who said it was considered in the wrong. And not only that, but also make it a cool thing. So not only turn it from negative to positive, but turn it from negative and derogatory to something desirable. And although the word could be used as interchangeable with bro or guy or man, but it also has a much deeper meaning than that, because it is used to describe a sense of community, a shared camaraderie, and a shared struggle amongst the community of the people who use it. And so it is much deeper than just saying man or guy, because there's an inferred meaning behind it. But also, it's not just a word that can be tossed around. It could be used with people you love, friends and family, as a term of endearment, but it could also be used as an insult with people you're fighting with. And it depends on the context. But it cannot just be said like, good morning, man, or how you doing, bro? It can't be said to someone you just met. So it is similar to these words, but it's also a little different. But I will say, as amazing as the reappropriation of the word was, it is a little weird for me to hear that word is still being used. And although now it could possibly have a positive connotation or a neutral connotation, it's still kind of weird, because it makes me think, like, what if the LGBT community was walking around calling each other f***s, or if Arabs are walking around calling each other sand, or Indians calling each other ragheads or towel heads, immigrants calling each other wetbacks, or Chinese people calling each other ching-chongs. These are all derogatory terms that were used to insult people of certain backgrounds and became rejected by society across the board, and no certain group of people could use it. It just became sort of something that everyone is not allowed to say, a red line. So it's just a little weird and also impressive that the word was able to be converted and used in that sense. What's the first thing that comes to mind when I sing this? Like prescription pills when you misusing them, nigga. The Templar Knights when they took Jerusalem, nigga. Am I a racist for saying that word in the context of that song? Because what really is racism? Isn't it discrimination and dehumanization and the devaluation of someone and the disrespect of someone simply based on their skin color or their race or ethnicity or background, and then not seeing them as equal, seeing them as somehow inferior? Isn't that what racism is? Like, how can you be offended by someone saying something in a completely different context? Because I get it that some words are usually used in a derogatory fashion. Like the word retard is usually used in a negative way, or the word is usually used in a negative way. And I get how these could be insulting. But a word like is usually neutral, if not even positive. So how could we just see the word of the usage of that word stripped of all context, still offensive under all circumstances? I just feel like everyone, especially in America, has this transgenerational guilt and fear. They just feel the need to police everyone because everything feels insulting to them, and they're offended by everything. Like, why are we taking it upon ourselves to police people? Just because something felt offensive to you, even though it had nothing to do with you and wasn't targeted at you in any way, and the context itself wasn't insulting, you still felt the need to be insulted. But not only that, you took it upon yourself to police people. I feel like we should normalize people being able to say and do whatever they want, as long as it's not hurting anyone else. Actually hurting anyone else, not that your feelings were hurt. But also on top of that, We should be able to use our brains to critically think about whether what someone did or said was actually offensive and insulting, and take action according to that knowledge and information. And look, I'm all for respecting people's wishes and respecting how people want to be addressed or interacted with. So if someone doesn't want to be called a certain word or a certain thing or a certain label, that's completely within their right to ask. It's completely reasonable. If someone wants to be referred to as a certain pronoun or name, then that's completely within their right. However, what's completely not within your right is telling people how to behave and talk outside of yourself when it's not concerning you. So I should be able to say whatever I want in whatever context I desire without being policed by you when you have nothing to do with the matter. So I respect if someone tells me, don't call me that's fine. But if someone comes and tells me, don't say then I got a problem, because the context in which I said it was in no way, shape, or form concerning you. And so you can't really interfere with that. The word lives in a gray area of who can use it and who cannot use it. And the first thing that comes to mind always is black people are allowed to, everyone else is not. But if we dive into the reason why there's a restriction, we find that the word has ties to the African American struggle and the repercussions that caused on the African American community. Here's my question. If you are a black person that is not from African American descent, if you are from a minority and you've been discriminated against, if you are from a poor family and have experienced poverty, if you are not from an African American descent and you've experienced some kind of police brutality, if you are a white person who's lived in a black community his whole life and was raised there, or if you are a black person of African American descent, but you were raised to a rich family in a white neighborhood and have seen none of these struggles, are any of these people allowed to say the word? And what is really the categorization that we're going by that allows people to say this magical word or restrict them from saying such word? Now, there are certain things in society that, if made exclusive to a group of people, will give them an advantage and put the other people at a disadvantage, like healthcare, education, loans, or owning property. However, I've always wondered, what is the benefit and the advantage that reserving the word give to the community that it's exclusive to? And nothing comes to mind. I can't think of a possible advantage, tangible advantage for that community. On the flip side, that also means that no one is at a disadvantage. So technically, it's not a big deal because they're not at an advantage and they're not at a disadvantage. But it's curious to me to find out what are the benefits of that. And so I guess it is not a big deal, but also why are we making such a fuss about it? This reminds me of a story. We were going to buy a dog and the lady walked us into the place where all the puppies were. And she pointed at the mother dog and she was like, "That's my favorite bitch." I was taken aback. But then I was reminded that the word bitch actually originally means female dog. And so context is very important. And the word bitch especially has at least 4 or 5 meanings depending on the context it's used in. And the same applies to many words in the English language, if not all of them, like gay or sick or bad or bitch. And so the same should apply to the word. If the word is not used in a racial or derogatory fashion, then it should not hold the same value that it would be when used in a racial or derogatory fashion. And so the usage of the word itself outside of that context should not be regarded as racist or insulting or offensive to anyone. And you know what's funny is that the word itself doesn't actually hold any significant value in terms of the English language. Like, it's just like any other word. It doesn't flow differently. It doesn't sound different. It doesn't have a special pronunciation. But the only reason it's gained so much traction is because, one, the black pop culture has made it so cool by association to the cool black culture. But also the exclusivity of the word gives it a special value. And now everyone wants in on that exclusive usage of the word. And so, in a way, ironically, trying to deter people from using that word has drawn much more attention to it and has inflated the topic far beyond if the word were to become normalized for everyone. And so that's like, it's interesting, but it's also creates like a dilemma. This might be an unpopular opinion. I think the monopolization of the word is in itself racist. And so somehow, ironically, what was intended to end racism turned into its own racist movement. And I'll tell you why. Because any kind of discrimination of people based on their skin color or ethnicity or race is the definition of racism. Now, obviously, these take different levels. So some kind of racism is intended to inflict harm upon other people. Some are intended to give privilege to certain people. In this case, I think it strips some people of their freedom of speech and empowers others with freedom of speech. And so I feel like, ironically, it has become its own racist indication of our society. And I'm not saying that's a conspiracy, but I think it started off on a good note, but then society somehow fell in that trap and inflated it into something that reflects racism. And I don't think the word is associated with black people because of its historical context. I actually think most people aren't aware of the historical context. However, the reason it's associated now with the black community is because it's exclusive usage by the black community, which creates yet another tie between the word and the community. But if we were to allow everyone to use it free of judgment, like any other word in the English dictionary, then with enough time, the connection would be broken. And there wouldn't be something linking that word to that community, which is ultimately what we're trying to do, right? The goal is to free the community of any such derogatory words. However, if anyone were to use it with that intention, then that is something that everyone would stand against anyway, regardless of whether it was exclusive or not. If it was used as a racial slur, then it would be something that people would stand against regardless. Moral of the story is, everyone should be allowed to speak freely with no judgments and no privilege to a specific group over the other. We should all be allowed to say the same words and use the same language. And then those of us who use these to inflict harm or insult towards other people with bad intention, then they should be punished accordingly. And that applies to any word in the English language, even if it doesn't historically have a derogatory context. If someone were to use it in a derogatory fashion, then they should be punished accordingly. With that being said, we should all be free and there should be equality across the board, because we don't want to fall in this trap of thinking we're doing something anti-racist when we're actually doing something with racist implications. With that in mind, and it's just me in this empty room staring at a camera, not talking to anybody, I will say, nigga. And if that offends you, then maybe you have been brainwashed to be emotionally triggered by anyone saying that word who does not look a certain way or fit a certain criteria. So let's all be tolerant towards each other and respect each other's wills when we're interacting with each other. Let's stop controlling one another, and let's actually give people the benefit of the doubt and use our brains to consider context and consider what things mean when people say them in specific contexts and react according to that. That's pretty much it. You guys have a wonderful day, and thank you for watching or listening to The Social Condom.